คันนี้ฟรีคนที่ดูจ้าเจจะได้เข้ามาเป็นผู้ติดตามใหม่แล้วมันมีไอ้นี่ด้วยซูเปอร์แตงอะถ้าคนชอบเราเขาจ่ายเงินได้ตั้งแต่ขั้นต่ำ40 บาทไปถึง10,000เลยนะสนับสนุนสมมติที่ออกกำลังกายทุกวันใช่ไหมโอ้หุ่นดีเขาชอบเงี้ยถ้าในอนาคตเขาสนับสนุนเขาก็ซื้อได้มันถ้าชอบพี่คนไหนในครีเอเตอร์ติดตามเขาบ่อยๆเงี้ยเขาเรามีเงินเราก็สนับสนุนช่วยเหลือเขาเงี้ยเขาทำคลิปมาให้คนดูตลอดแค่เข้าใจแล้วไอ้พวกที่แคสเกมแล้วทำ YouTube แล้วได้เงินทำยังไงอย่างนี้เนี่ยเราไม่ได้เล่นเกมเลยเล่นเกมพวกนั้นเขาทำเงินจากสิ่งที่เขาชอบคือเขาเล่นเกมเพราะว่าไลฟ์สดเล่นเกมตลอดเราชอบกินข้าวปะเราชอบกินข้าวชอบออกกำลังกายก็ไลฟ์สดออกกำลังกายเธอชอบนอนก็ไลฟ์สดนอน
ใครได้มาดู
ก็ตั้งกล้องไว้มีโทรศัพท์เดี๋ยวไม่ดูไม่รู้อ่ะมันจะมีคนดูเยอะก็ได้ตั้งกล้องแล้วก็นอน
คนคุยด้วยก็ไม่คุยยังนอนอย่างเดียวใครให้มาดู
ก็คุยบ้าง
ก็นึกว่าตายไปแล้วนั่นแหละคนก็เข้ามาเรียกลงพยาบาลแล้วนะ
เผลอๆอาจจะมีผู้ติดตามส่งซุปเปอร์แตงก็น้องที่เกียร์ลูกสูตรอาจารย์เตี้ย
คนบอกเฮ้ยเรียกรถปวดตึงๆยังอืดแล้วนะ
ลองทำยังไงเธออาจจะเป็นคนแรกก็ได้ที่ไก่สดนอนคนเขาชอบไงเขาอยากนอนเขาก็Hello everyone, nice to meet you. เพื่อนๆหลายคนคงสงสัยทำไมเชียร์ไลฟ์สดเรื่องนี้อันนี้เป็น my lunch time this is my lunch time ว้าว noon at 6 by 6 นาที my lunch time โอเค today you don't see my eating but that's alright it will see in in the lunch ตอนเช้าทุกคนไม่ได้เห็นตอนเช็คกินข้าวเมื่อไหร่นี่กลางวันก็เห็น
รีบกิน
จะทาเสื้อร้อน
เมื่อคืนอะไรไม่รู้หล่นมาจากนู่น
ก็อะไรอ่ะ
ไม่รู้มันหล่นลงมา
ทำไมเธอไม่เห็นใจวะ
นี่ไงสีเหลืองนี่อะไร
ท่อปะ
ก็เชียนอนอุดหูอุดหางจะได้กินอะไรล่ะ
เนาะtime to eat ในเวลากินนะทุกคนวันนี้ถือว่าเช็คกินช้ากว่าเดิมหน่อยบ่ายอะปกติเช็คกินประมาณ 11 โมงถึงเที่ยง
วันนี้เราไม่ได้ไปบ้านแถวใช่ไหม
น่าจะไม่ได้ไปเถอะเพราะว่ามีภารกิจที่มาใช้กับที่กระทุ่มแบน
บ้านใหญ่ใช่ไหม
บ้านใหญ่นั่นแหละมันอยู่กระทุ่มแบนไง
วันเพ็ญเดือน12น้ำนองนองกระดิ่งเราทั้งหลายชายหญิงสนุกกันจริงวันลอยกระทงลอยกระทงลอยกระทงกันแล้วก็ยังไงต่อขอเชิญน้องแก้วมาพรน้ำมงพ่อร้องได้
So, I'm from Guatemala. This is a public service announcement. That is where Guatemala is. Also, that is not where they keep the prisoners. That is called Guantanamo. Not the same place. So, Guatemala is right below Mexico. And for the Americans in the audience, and let this sink in because it really applies in most ways. For the Americans in the audience, you can think of it as Mexico's Mexico. Just like the U.S. doesn't want illegal immigration from Mexico, Mexico doesn't want illegal immigration from Guatemala. It's a smaller country, it's a poorer country, and, well, what can I tell you? It has much better Mexican food. Guatemala is a very poor country, and a lot of people talk about education as something that brings equality to different social classes. But I always saw it as the opposite, as something that brings inequality. Because what happens in practice is that people who have a lot of money can buy themselves a really good education and therefore continue having a lot of money. Whereas people who don't have very much money barely learn how to read and write and therefore never make a lot of money. And this is especially true in poor countries. Now, I was fortunate that I received a rich person's education, even though I didn't grow up rich. And it's because I'm an only child. And my mother, who was a single mother, spent all of her resources on my education. And this allowed me to come to college to the US and eventually get a PhD in computer science. Now, because of all of this, about 10 years ago, I decided I wanted to do something that would give equal access to education to everyone. Oh, by the way, this is what I want to talk to you about today, giving equal access to education to everyone. At the time, I was a professor of computer science at Carnegie Mellon University, and I decided to work on this with my PhD student, Severin. The way my brain works, all of education is just too general of a problem. So I decided, let's start by teaching one thing. And then I started thinking, okay, well, what should we teach first? Should we teach math? I mean, we both loved math. Me and my co-founder, we both love math. And, you know, we didn't decide to do math. Then we started thinking, well, maybe we should teach computer science. But eventually, and this may be surprising to people in North America, eventually we decided that the best subject to start with was teaching foreign languages. And let me tell you why. There's a number of reasons. One of them is that there's a huge audience for it. There's about 2 billion people in the world learning a foreign language, both in school and outside of schools. Most of these people, by the way, are learning English. About 80% of them are learning English. In this weird map right here, all the countries in green are countries in which people are predominantly learning English. And the reason for that is because English can truly transform your life. In most countries in the world, knowledge of English can significantly increase your income potential. So this is another reason why we decided to start with foreign languages, and it's because you can directly make more money if you learn another language, in particular English. And see, this is pretty different than many other subjects. For example, take math. In the case of math, just knowledge of math does not increase your income potential, because usually you have to learn math to then learn physics, to then become a civil engineer. Like, that's how you make more money. Whereas with languages, if you were a waiter and you learn English, now you can be a waiter at a hotel and make more money. So we decided, well, let's get started by teaching languages. Now, we also convinced ourselves that the only way to really reach a lot of people was by using a mobile phone, or a smartphone in particular. See, building schools all over the world is simply too expensive. On the other hand, most of the world's population already has access to a smartphone, and the trend is that that fraction is only going to increase. So we decided at the time that we would make a way to learn foreign languages on a mobile phone that was accessible to everyone. And then we called it Duolingo. Now, in order to truly be accessible to everyone, rich and poor, Duolingo uses a freemium model to support itself. What that means is that you can learn as much as you want without ever having to pay. But if you don't pay, you may have to see an ad at the end of a lesson. Now, if you don't like ads, you can also pay to subscribe to turn off the ads. And it turns out that the vast majority of the revenue for Duolingo comes from people who pay to subscribe to turn off the ads. Now, who are these people who pay to subscribe to turn off the ads? Well, they're usually people, well-off people in rich countries like the US and Canada. Who are the people who don't pay to subscribe? They usually come from poorer countries like Brazil or Vietnam or Guatemala. So what I like about this model is that it is a small form of wealth redistribution, because we're basically getting the rich people to pay for the education of everyone. So I like that. Yes. Okay, so great. So with smartphones, we can reach a lot of people, and we can even get the rich people to pay for the whole thing. This is great. However, if you're trying to deliver education with a smartphone, you run into a humongous problem. And it is that smartphones come equipped with some of the most addictive drugs that humanity has ever engineered. TikTok, Instagram, mobile games. See, delivering education over a smartphone is like hoping that people will eat their broccoli, but right next to it, you put the most delicious dessert ever made. If you really want to deliver education to everyone, not only do you have to make it accessible, but also you have to make it so that people want to actually learn. And with Duolingo, we've been able to do this. And at the highest level, the way we've done this is by making the broccoli taste like dessert. I'll say it another way. What we've done is that we've used the same psychological techniques that apps like Instagram, TikTok, or mobile games use to keep people engaged. But in this case, we use them to keep people engaged, but with education. Let me give you some examples of these techniques. One of the most powerful ones is the notion of a streak. What a streak is just a counter that measures the number of days that you've used the product consecutively. You just take that number, you put it very prominently in your product, and then people come back every day. And the reason people come back every day is because, well, if they don't come back, that number resets to 0, and people don't want to lose their streak. It works. Now, on the one side, streaks have been criticized for example, getting teens addicted to Snapchat. But in the case of an educational app, streaks get people to come back to study every day. Now, to give you an idea of the power of streaks, in the case of Duolingo, we have over 3 million daily active users that have a streak longer than 365. That means they haven't missed a day in the last year or longer. Now, fun fact about streaks. What country do you think has the longest average streaks for an educational app? It's Japan. Of course. Shortest average streaks? Latin America, baby. But we're fun. Hey, we're fun. Another important mechanism to get people to come back to your product are notifications. On the one side, notifications can be really spammy and annoying, but in the case of an educational product, people actually want to be reminded to learn. In the case of Duolingo, we have a very sophisticated AI system that basically chooses when to send a notification and also what to say in each notification to maximize the probability that people come back. Now, interestingly, even after all this sophistication, it turns out that the algorithm for choosing what time to send you a notification is pretty simple. You know what is the best time to send people a notification? I'll tell you. It's 24 hours after they used the product last. Because, and there's an easy explanation. If you were free yesterday at 3 p.m., you're probably free today at 3 p.m. as well. So this is what a very sophisticated millions of dollars of AI found. It's funny. Now, with notifications, you shouldn't be spammy. And we're not spammy. With Duolingo, we actually stop sending notifications after 7 days of inactivity. So if you don't use Duolingo for 7 days, we stop sending you notifications. Now, at some point, it occurred to us, if we're stopping to send people notifications, we should let them know. So we started sending this notification to people saying, hey, these reminders don't seem to be working. We'll stop sending them for now. You know what people do when they get this notification? They come back. Passive aggressive. Works for my mother, works for Duolingo. These passive-aggressive notifications are really good at getting people to come back because they feel like our green owl mascot has given up on them. So they come back. And speaking of our green owl mascot, by the way, because all our notifications come from our green owl mascot, and well, he's passive-aggressive and also pretty pushy, this has given rise to a lot of memes on the internet that make fun of just the great lengths that he will go through to get you back to learn a language. favorite ones. It's a meme. It's one of my favorite ones. It's basically looks like you forgot your Spanish lessons, and then there's an intruder alert. Presumably the owl broke into your house to get you to learn language. Now, Duolingo has entered the zeitgeist, and there's thousands of memes. There's SNL skits about it, and it's because we've managed to get people to want to learn a language by using the same techniques that mobile games and social media use to get people engaged. And this is a really important point. Let me say this. I don't actually believe that there's a way to make an educational app be as engaging as something like TikTok or Instagram or mobile games. But the good news is that, and by the way, the reason I don't believe that is because ultimately you have to teach people something, and it's hard to compete with like cats and celebrities. But the good news is that I don't think you have to. See, here's the thing. When you're learning something, you get meaning out of it. Whereas when you're scrolling for 2 hours on Instagram, a lot of times afterwards, you feel like you just wasted your time. So I think it's actually okay if your educational product is only 80 or 90% as engaging as something like TikTok. Because the other 10 or 20% will be provided by people's internal motivation. Though, of course, not much more than that. This is really a key point. If we want to get people to do something meaningful, you can use the same techniques that apps like social media use to get people to do it. And even if you're not as engaging as those apps are, you can still get hundreds of millions of people to use your product. In the case of Duolingo, for example, there are more people learning languages on Duolingo in the United States than there are people learning languages across all US high schools combined. And this is true in most countries in the world. My hope is that I know we can do this, but my hope is that as humanity we can do what Duolingo has done for learning languages, but for all other subjects, where we can get people to learn math with mobile phones, like millions of people to learn math with mobile phones, or physics, or whatever. I hope for a future in which screen time is not a bad thing, in which we can deliver high-quality education to everyone, rich or poor, using a mobile phone. But the single most important thing that I can end this talk with is a reminder to please, pretty please, I beg you, do your language lessons today. Thank you very much. Engaging as those apps are, be as engaging as something like TikTok or Instagram or mobile games. But the good news is that, and by the way, the reason I don't believe that is because ultimately you have to teach people something, and it's hard to compete with like cats and celebrities. But the good news is that I don't think you have to. See, here's the thing. When you're learning something, you get meaning out of it. Whereas when you're scrolling for 2 hours on Instagram, a lot of times afterwards, you feel like you just wasted your time. So I think it's actually okay if your educational product is only 80 or 90% as engaging as something like TikTok, because the other 10 or 20% will be provided by people's internal motivation. Though, of course, not much more than that. This is really a key point. If we want to get people to do something meaningful, you can use the same techniques that apps like social media use to get people to do it. And even if you're not as engaging as those apps are, you can still get hundreds of millions of people to use your product. In the case of Duolingo, for example, there are more people learning languages on Duolingo in the United States than there are people learning languages across all US high schools combined. And this is true in most countries in the world. My hope is that, well, I know we can do this, but my hope is that as humanity, we can do what Duolingo has done for learning languages, but for all other subjects, where we can get people to learn math with mobile phones, like millions of people to learn math with mobile phones, or physics, or whatever. I hope for a future in which screen time is not a bad thing, in which we can deliver high-quality education to everyone, rich or poor, using a mobile phone. But the single most important thing that I can end this talk with is a reminder to please, pretty please, I beg you, do your language lessons today. Thank you very much.
Luis, thank you so much. Thank you. I wonder if you could just say a little bit more about that last point about how do you think that you can apply this type of thinking to other subjects? So you mentioned math, you mentioned things like that. How do you do that?
Yeah, I think in particular subjects that are learned through repetition, it turns out most things that are really meaningful learned through like thousands of repetitions. You learn to read through repetition. You learn elementary school math through repetition. Most things that you can learn through repetition, you can actually gamify and turn into something like Duolingo, where people just do it a lot and do it fun. It's a little harder for things like explanations. That's probably going to require some really good videos. Sal Khan is doing a really good job with that. But for things that require a lot of repetition, I think we can use the same methods.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
มากหมูเด้งนอนหลับอยู่ที่เตียงนอนอะไรเกิดบ้างอ่ะอย่าบอกใครแล้วกันนะมันจะเถิดด้วย
Hi everyone.
นอนเลยนะฉันบอกไม่เดือด
2 years ago, my life changed forever. My wife Kelsey and I welcomed our daughter Leela into the world. Now, becoming a parent is an amazing, amazing experience. Your whole world changes overnight, and all of your priorities change immediately, so fast that Hi everyone. 2 years ago, my life changed forever. My wife Kelsey and I welcomed our daughter Leela into the world. Now, becoming a parent is an amazing, amazing experience. Your whole world changes overnight, and all of your priorities change immediately, so fast that it makes it really difficult to process sometimes. Now, you also have to learn a tremendous amount about being a parent. Like, for example, how to dress your child. This was new to me. This is an actual outfit. I thought this was a good idea. And even Leela knows that it's not a good idea. So there was so much to learn and so much craziness all at once. And to add to the craziness, Kelsey and I both work from home. We're entrepreneurs. We run our own businesses. So Kelsey develops courses online for yoga teachers. I'm an author. And so I'm working for home. Kelsey's working for home. We have an infant, and we're trying to make sure that everything gets done that needs done. And life is really, really, really busy. And a couple weeks into this amazing experience, when the sleep deprivation really kicked in, like around week 8, I had this thought, and it was the same thought that parents across the ages internationally, everybody has had this thought, which is, I am never going to have free time ever again. And somebody said it's true. Yeah, it's not exactly true, but it feels really, really true in that moment. And this was really disconcerting to me, because one of the things that I enjoy more than anything else is learning new things. Getting curious about something and diving in and fiddling around and learning through trial and error and eventually becoming pretty good at something. And without this free time, I didn't know how I was ever going to do that ever again. And so I'm a big geek. I want to keep learning things. I want to keep growing. And so what I decided to do was go to the library and go to the bookstore and look at what research says about how we learn and how we learn quickly. And I read a bunch of books, I read a bunch of websites, and trying to answer this question, how long does it take to acquire a new skill? You know what I found? 10,000 hours.
น้ำอะไรเขียวจังน้ำกดอยากกินน้ำกะเพราคอมเมนต์หนูหน่อยถ้าอ่านคอมเมนต์หนูอาบนะหนูนอนแล้ววันนี้เหรอวันนี้น้ำชาเขียวจ้าชาเขียวกินที
Anybody ever heard this? 10,000 takes 10,000 hours. If you want to learn something new, if you want to be good at it, it's going to take 10,000 hours to get there. And I read this in book after book and website after website, and my mental experience of reading all of this stuff was like, no, I don't have time. I don't have 10,000 hours. I am never going to be able to learn anything new ever again.
10,000 hour เหรอ How many day to be 10,000 hour I will calculate just a minute 10,000 hour โอ้ตุ๊ดโอ้100 one year one maybe 14 month to achieve and high skill in 10,000 hour
But that's not true. So 10,000 hours, just to give you a rough order of magnitude, 10,000 hours is a full-time job for 5 years. That's a long time. And we've all had the experience of learning something new, and it didn't take us anywhere close to that amount of time, right? So what's up? There's something kind of funky going on here. What the research says and what we expect and have experiences, they don't match up. And what I found, here's the wrinkle. The 10,000 hour rule came out of studies of expert level performance. There was a professor at Florida State University. His name is K. Anders Ericsson. He's the originator of the 10,000 hour rule. And where that came from is he studied professional athletes, world-class musicians, chess grandmasters, all of these ultra-competitive folks in ultra-high-performing fields, and he tried to figure out how long does it take to get to the top of those kinds of fields. And what he found is the more deliberate practice, the more time that those individuals spent practicing the elements, whatever it is that they do, the more time you spend, the better you get. And the folks at the tippy top of their field,
มีแต่หนูคนเดียวที่ดูที่ยังไม่มีใครคอมเมนต์พี่เลยอ่ะใช่แล้วขอบคุณมากครับที่ดูสิ
put in around 10,000 hours of practice. Now, we were talking about the game of telephone a little bit earlier. Here's what happened. An author by the name of Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book in 2007 called Outliers, the Story of Success. And the centerpiece of that book was the 10,000 hour rule. Practice a lot, practice well, and you will do extremely well. You reach the top of your field. So, the message, what Dr. Ericsson was actually saying is, it takes 10,000 hours to get to the top of an ultra-competitive field in a very narrow subject. That's what that means. But here's what happened. Ever since Outliers came out, immediately came out, reached the top of the bestseller list, stayed there for 3 solid months.
น้องแรงฝรั่งกินข้าวกับอะไรอ่ะใช่เหรอเฮ้ยใครโทรมา089-921-4517ใครโทรมาเครื่องนี้ก็ไม่รู้เธอแปลกจัง ดีไงเราจะไปหน้าบรรยายพอดี15 5 บวก 9 เท่ากับเท่าไหร่15 บวก 9 เหรอ15 16 17 18 19 20 21 22 23 24 24ครับแย่งเชียร์กัน24จ้า
All of a sudden, the 10,000 hour rule was everywhere. And a society-wide game of telephone started to be played. So this message, it takes 10,000 hours to reach the top of an ultra-competitive field, became, it takes 10,000 hours to become an expert at something. Which became, it takes 10,000 hours to become good at something. Which became, it takes 10,000 hours to learn something. But that last statement, it takes 10,000 hours to learn something, it's not true. It's not true. So, what the research actually says, if I spend a lot of time here at the CSU library in the cognitive psychology stacks, because I'm a geek. And when you actually look at the studies of skill acquisition, you see over and over and over a graph like this. Now, researchers, whether they're studying a motor skill, something you do physically, or a mental skill, they like to study things that they can time, because you can quantify that, right? So they'll give research participants a little task, something that requires physical arrangement, or something that requires learning a little mental trick, and they'll time how long a participant takes to complete the skill. And here's what this graph says. When you start, so when researchers gave participants a task, it took them a really long time because it was new and they were horrible. With a little bit of practice, they get better and better and better, and that early part of practice is really, really efficient. People get good at things with just a little bit of practice. Now, what's interesting to note is that if, we don't really, for skills that we want to learn for ourselves, we don't care so much about time, right? We just care about how good we are, whatever good happens to mean. So if we relabel performance time to how good you are, the graph flips, and you get this famous and widely known, this is the learning curve. And the story of the learning curve is when you start, you're grossly incompetent.
มีเกี๊ยวน้ำไหมนอนแล้วไม่คุยด้วยแล้วขอโทษหนูด้วยมีเกี๊ยวน้ำไหมคืออะไรเหรอมีเกี๊ยวน้ำ
and you know it, right? With a little bit of practice, you get really good really quick. So that early level of improvement is really fast. And then at a certain point, you reach a plateau, and the subsequent gains become much harder to get. They take more time to get. Now, my question is, I want that, right? How long does it take from starting something and being grossly incompetent and knowing it to being reasonably good in, hopefully, as short a period of time as possible? So, how long does that take? Here's what my research says. 20 hours. That's it. You can go from knowing nothing about any skill that you can think of. Want to learn a language? Want to learn how to draw? Want to learn how to juggle flaming chainsaws? If you put 20 hours of focused, deliberate practice into that thing, you will be astounded at how good you are. 20 hours is doable. That's about 45 minutes a day for about a month. Even skipping a couple days here and there. 20 hours isn't that hard to accumulate. Now, there's a method to doing this, because it's not like you can just start fiddling around for about 20 hours and expect these massive improvements. There's a way to practice intelligently. There's a way to practice efficiently that will make sure that you invest those 20 hours in the most effective way that you possibly can. And here's the method. It applies to anything. The first is to deconstruct the skill. Decide exactly what you want to be able to do when you're done, and then look into the skill and break it down into smaller and smaller pieces. Most of the things that we think of as skills are actually big bundles of skills that require all sorts of different things. The more you can break apart the skill, the more you're able to decide what are the parts of this skill that will actually help me get to what I want, and then you can practice those first. And if you practice the most important things first, you'll be able to improve your performance in the least amount of time possible. The second is learn enough to self-correct. So get 3 to 5 resources about what it is you're trying to learn. Could be books, could be DVDs, could be courses, could be anything. But don't use those as a way to procrastinate on practice. I know I do this, right? Get like 20 books about the topic. It's like, I'm going to start learning how to program a computer when I complete these 20 books. No, that's procrastination. What you want to do is learn just enough that you can actually practice and self-correct or self-edit as you practice. So the learning becomes a way of getting better at noticing when you're making a mistake and then doing something a little different. The third is to remove barriers to practice. Distractions, television, internet, all of these things that get in the way of you actually sitting down and doing the work. And the more you're able to use just a little bit of willpower to remove the distractions that are keeping you from practicing, the more likely you are to actually sit down and practice, right? And the fourth is to practice for at least 20 hours. Now, most skills have what I call a frustration barrier. You know, the grossly incompetent knowing it part, that's really, really frustrating. We don't like to feel stupid. And feeling stupid is a barrier to us actually sitting down and doing the work. So by pre-committing to practicing whatever it is that you want to do, the more likely. So the learning becomes a way of getting better at noticing when you're making a mistake and then doing something a little different. The third is to remove barriers to practice. Distractions, television, internet, all of these things that get in the way of you actually sitting down and doing the work. And the more you're able to use just a little bit of willpower to remove the distractions that are keeping you from practicing, the more likely you are to actually sit down and practice, right? And the fourth is to practice for at least 20 hours. Now, most skills have what I call a frustration barrier. You know, the grossly incompetent knowing it part, that's really, really frustrating. We don't like to feel stupid. And feeling stupid is a barrier to us actually sitting down and doing the work. So by pre-committing to practicing whatever it is that you want to do for at least 20 hours, you will be able to overcome that initial frustration barrier and stick with the practice long enough to actually reap the rewards. All right, that's it. It's not rocket science. 4 very simple steps that you can use to learn anything. Now, this is easy to talk about in theory, but it's more fun to talk about in practice. So one of the things that I've wanted to learn how to do for a long time is play the ukulele. Has anybody seen Jake Shimabukuro's TED Talk where he plays the ukulele and makes it sound like he's like an ukulele god? It's amazing. It's like I saw this. It's like, that is so cool. It's such a neat instrument. I would really like to learn how to play. And so I decided that to test this theory, I wanted to put 20 hours into practicing the ukulele and see where we got. And so the first thing about playing the ukulele is, in order to practice, you have to have one, right? So I got an ukulele, and my lovely assistant. Thank you, sir. I think I need the cord here. It's not just an ukulele, it's an electric ukulele. Yeah. So the first couple hours are just like the first couple hours of anything. You have to get the tools that you're using to practice. You have to make sure that they're available. My ukulele didn't come with strings attached. I had to figure out how to put those on. Like, that's kind of important, right? and learning how to tune and learning how to make sure that all of the things that need to be done in order to start practicing get done, right? Now, one of the things when I was ready to actually start practicing was I looked in online databases and songbooks for how to play songs. And they say, okay, ukuleles, you can play more than one string at a time, so you can play chords. That's cool. You're accompanying yourself. Yay, you. And when I started looking at songs, I had an ukulele chord book that had like hundreds of chords. Looking at the same, like, whoa, that's intimidating. But when you look at the actual songs, you see the same chords over and over, right? As it turns out, playing the ukulele is kind of like doing anything. There's a very small set of things that are really important and techniques that you'll use all the time. And so in most songs, you'll use 4, maybe 5 chords, and that's it. That's the song. You don't have to know the hundreds as long as you know the 4 or the 5. So while I was doing my research, I found a wonderful little medley of pop songs by a band called Axis of Awesome. And somebody knows it. And what Axis of Awesome says is that you can learn, or you can play pretty much any pop song of the past 5 decades if you know 4 chords. And those chords are G, D, E minor, C. 4 chords, pump out every pop song ever, right? So I thought, this is cool. I would like to play every pop song ever. So that was the first song I decided to learn, and I would like to actually share it with you. Ready? All right. Just a small town girl living in a lonely world. She took a midnight train going anywhere. I heard that you settled down, that you found a girl, that you're married now. Every night in my dreams I see you, I feel you. That is how I know we'll go on. I won't hesitate no more, no more. It cannot wait, I'm yours. 'Cause you are amazing. We did amazing things. If I could, then I would go wherever you will. And can you feel the love tonight? Live with or without you. When I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me. Sometimes I feel like I don't have a partner. No woman, no cry. I'm on the surely is a dream. I come from a London under. Once a jolly swag man camped by a billabong. Hey, I just met you, and this is crazy. Now here's my number.
Alright.
So call me, hey, sexy lady.
Yeah.
Gangnam Style.
Ano ba? Sige, tuwa ka.
Say goodbye. Closing time. Every new beginning comes from some